There are wounds that only time can heal, but some curses are cast by a mother who betrays her own child with the coldest cruelty imaginable. I once believed my mother would be the steady shoulder shielding me from life's storms. But that faith was shattered when I was just 16 years old. When she gave birth to twins with her new husband, instead of being my refuge, the home I once called family became a prison where I was cast out without a word of explanation. "They deserve this more than you," my mother said, her face cold, void of any mercy. Me, a child abandoned by my biological father, was judged a burden, a stranger amidst my own flesh and blood. I clung desperately to the hope of fairness, begging for the love only a mother could give, but all I found was cold indifference and ruthless neglect. That marked the start of a lonely, grueling journey, working multiple jobs, borrowing every penny to afford college. A battle I fought alone without any family truly standing by my side. Then, just as I began to taste success, climbing the ranks in my career, the very woman who had cast me away returned, not to congratulate me, but to demand that I pay for my half-siblings' college tuition. The anger, the heartbreak, and the deep betrayal exploded inside me. I refuse, no, I cannot, bow to a responsibility forced upon me by those who abandoned me. Before we dive into this story, please drop a comment below telling us which city you're watching from. Enjoy the video and get ready to join me on this raw journey of pain, truth, and unspoken emotions. Are you ready to hear the story of a daughter discarded, and her silent fight for justice through the storm of heartbreak? Leave your thoughts below, because this is not just a tale of a broken family, but a fierce battle for love and fairness that I refuse to lose. My story begins not with the warm embrace of family, but with the cold shadow of abandonment. My mother was just 20 years old when she gave birth to me, a child conceived in the briefest flicker of young love that soon vanished. My biological father never wanted me. He left before I even took my first breath, and from that moment, I was left in a world that felt both unfamiliar and unkind. My mother faced the impossible alone. Bitter memories of their failed relationship kept her silent about child support, and my father's refusal to be a part of my life left a void no one could fill. In those early years, my only refuge was the unwavering support of my grandparents, two people whose love became the foundation I desperately needed. They stood like ancient trees shielding a fragile sapling, offering encouragement that kept me hopeful, even as my mother struggled to keep her footing in a world that demanded so much. But hope was fragile. I grew up watching my mother date and eventually marry Harry, a coworker who came into our lives when I was 8. Harry was a quiet presence, never quite a father to me, but someone I tolerated for the sake of peace. When my mother became pregnant with twins 4 years into her marriage, something inside shifted. She began distancing herself from me, the child she had raised alone. It didn't hit me at first. I thought the ice between us was just a phase, something that would thaw. Yet beneath that hopeful surface lay a fracture. I was no longer the center of her world. I was pushed aside, replaced by the demands of a new family. I tried to be patient, to support her through her pregnancy, but her growing anger made even my presence unbearable. To avoid stirring conflict, I withdrew, but apparently, I was never invisible enough. 6 months after the twins were born, my mother and Harry sat me down to deliver a brutal ultimatum. "We can't keep you here," they said, hiding behind financial struggles and the needs of their new children. I was 16, still a child by law, and yet, I was being cast out. Their words stung deeply, not just for what they meant but for the cold calculation behind them. This was not about money. This was about erasing me from their lives. I remember feeling shattered, betrayed not only by my mother but by a family that once promised to protect me. I offered to help, to get a job, to ease their burden, but my mother dismissed me, saying the twins deserved more than I did. Those words echoed in my mind for years. The family that was supposed to be my sanctuary had painted me the enemy. Unable to stay, I found refuge with my grandparents. Yet even there, the wounds ran deep. Their love was real, but their age and health meant I had to shoulder much of my own survival. I juggled part-time jobs, school, and the aching void of a home lost. Meanwhile, my mother and Harry, caught up in their new family, rarely asked about me. When they did, it felt like I was less than a stranger. This chapter of my life is one of quiet anguish and simmering resilience, a young girl betrayed, but not broken. It was a time when I learned the hardest lessons about love, loyalty, and self-worth. And as I carried the weight of abandonment, those lessons fueled a fire inside me, a determination that I would forge my own path, no matter the cost. But this was only the beginning. From the ruins of my fractured childhood, would rise, but not without facing new storms. The next chapter would test me in ways I could never have imagined. The harsh realities of independence, the struggle to hold on to hope, and the fight to reclaim my dignity amid the shadows of a family that turned its back on me. Join me as I take you through those years, the loneliness, the battles, and the gradual discovery of strength beneath the pain. This is not just my story, it's the story of anyone who's ever been discarded but refused to be defined by rejection. The day my mother and Harry sat me down in that cold, unfamiliar room remains etched in my memory. It was the day everything I believed about family was brutally shattered. I was 16, legally still a child, yet they spoke to me as if I were an unwanted guest in my own home. They told me bluntly, "We can't keep you here anymore. The twins need all the attention and resources. They deserve it more." Those words were like a knife twisting in my heart. I remember looking at my mother's face, trying to find even a flicker of the love I once knew. Instead, I saw something chillingly indifferent, as if I was no longer her child but a problem to be solved. Harry sat silently by her side, a quiet enforcer of this cruel verdict. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. I was a burden, a distraction from their new family's future. Despite my shock and pain, I gathered whatever strength I had left and offered solutions. I would get a job, I would do whatever it took to help ease their financial strain. But my mother waved it away coldly, her words cutting deep. "We're saving for the twins. They deserve it more than you ever did." The cruelty of those words, the deliberate choice to prioritize newborn siblings over a child they had raised alone, was a betrayal I struggled to comprehend. It was more than just money. It was about being pushed out of the family narrative, erased from the very home where I had taken my first steps and said my first words. I was forced to become invisible, to fade into the background as if I never belonged. The place that should have been a sanctuary became a battleground, and I was the casualty. That day, I packed what little I could carry and left, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I sought refuge with my grandparents, whose love became a lifeline amid the chaos. But even they were aging, their own health declining, leaving me to fend for myself in more ways than one. The nights were the hardest, alone in a world that had suddenly turned its back on me. The silent question haunted me: why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't I be the daughter my mother wanted? Each day was a struggle not only to survive but to keep the flickering ember of hope alive. I wasn't the only one living through this pain. My grandparents watched with heavy hearts, torn between their affection for me and their loyalty to their daughter and grandchildren. Family dinners became strained events, where my name was rarely mentioned. When the twins visited, the warmth I longed for was replaced by cold formality. I was a ghost in a life that had moved on without me. This was the moment that defined my adolescence. A painful crossroads where love was conditional, and family ties were severed with silent cruelty. But within that heartbreak, a seed of resilience took root. I vowed that no matter how dark the days, would forge my own path. I would build a life that proved my worth beyond the shadows of rejection. Yet this was only the beginning of a long and turbulent journey. Ahead lay the fierce struggle to stand on my own, to rise above the pain, and to confront the family that had cast me out. Sometimes with kindness, sometimes with confrontation. As we move forward, I will share the sacrifices, the lonely battles, and the moments when hope seemed impossible but still burned bright. This is the story of a girl who was pushed out but refused to disappear. Once the door closed on my childhood home, I stepped into a world that demanded I grow up overnight. At 16, I was thrust into the harsh reality of independence, not by choice, but by necessity. The protection and warmth I thought family offered vanished, replaced by a cold uncertainty that tested every ounce of my strength. My grandparents, though aging and frail, became my sanctuary. Their home welcomed me with open arms, but it was clear they could not carry the weight of my new life forever. They did all they could, offering comfort, wisdom, and small doses of encouragement, but the financial burden and physical demands of their own age meant I had to rapidly learn self-reliance. I took on part-time jobs, anything I could find, to support myself. Balancing work, school, and emotional exhaustion felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. There were nights when exhaustion wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, and loneliness gnawed at my soul, whispering doubts I struggled to silence. I missed the simplicity of childhood, but more than that, I craved the feeling of being wanted, supported, loved. The financial strain was relentless. College was a distant dream, a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb. Yet giving up was not an option. With the help of a relative who believed in me enough to co-sign a student loan, someone I barely knew well enough but who became a quiet hero in my story, I took the plunge. Taking on debt weighed heavily, but the prospect of education was a beacon in a sea of uncertainty. Through those years, I juggled classes and shifts, always aware that my success depended solely on my determination. I worked tirelessly to ensure I could pay off debts, rent, groceries, everything a normal teenager hopefully wouldn't have to worry about alone. The sharp contrast between my reality and that of my mother's new family, who lived comfortably, focusing resources on their twins, felt like a constant, unspoken accusation. Occasionally, I crossed paths with my mother and Harry. Their appearances were brief, their questions about me sparse and formal, as if I were a stranger bearing no relation. Their indifference was a fresh wound, deepening the betrayal I'd carried for years. In those moments, the weight of abandonment settled heavier on my shoulders. I'd be lying if I said there were no moments of weakness, times when I doubted if I was strong enough to continue, when the silence from the very people who should have cared felt unbearable. But with every challenge, I found flickers of resilience. I learned to trust in my own capacity to survive and even thrive, to build a life where my worth wasn't defined by rejection but by relentless perseverance. Looking back, those years were a crucible forging my character. The loneliness, the sacrifices, the ceaseless hustle, they shaped me into someone who refuses to be invisible, who demands respect not just from others, but from herself. Yet, while I built my life from fragments of pain, the story was far from over. As I continued to grow, succeed, and finally climb the ranks to a career I could be proud of, the ghosts of my past, my mother's neglect, her family's rejection, haunted me in new and unexpected ways. After years of struggle, balancing jobs, studying late into the night, and wrestling with the haunting sense of abandonment, I finally began to see the fruits of my labor. I climbed the ranks at my company, slowly carving out a life that wasn't defined by my past but by my own hard work and determination. This wasn't just a career, it was a testament to my survival, a declaration that I was more than the discarded child my family tried to erase. Yet, with every promotion, every milestone, came an unexpected shadow, the cold silence from the very people who, by right, should have been my loudest supporters. My mother and her new family had vanished from my life for years, their absence a relentless reminder of the family I lost. The loneliness of success was a bitter irony, succeeding on my own, yet feeling the sting of being denied the simplest acknowledgement from those who should have been proud. Then, one day, that silence shattered. My mother and Harry appeared at my doorstep, not with congratulations or reconciliations, but with an audacious demand. To pay for my half-sibling's college tuition. The irony was as sharp as a dagger, the same woman who had pushed me out with cold indifference now expected me to become the provider for the children she had placed before me. I remember the moment vividly, their faces, expectant yet resigned, mine, incredulous and burning with rage. How could they have the nerve? After years of neglect, after turning their backs when I needed them most, they believed I owed them this? Their words blurred between pleas and accusations, but beneath it all was a chilling message, that I was still a tool for their convenience, a solution to their financial problems. Inside me, a storm raged, a mixture of fury, betrayal, and profound sadness. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a punishment for surviving without their help. I challenged them, telling them how I had worked tirelessly to pay my own way through college, while they saved every dime for their real children. I reminded them sharply that I owed them nothing, and certainly not the price of their new family's comfort. My mother tried to gaslight me, painting herself as the victim, accusing me of ingratitude. But I saw through the facade. The confrontation unveiled years of lies and selfishness, highlighting a family divide that was no longer bridgeable with empty words. This reunion was not the healing I had hoped for. It was a final reckoning, raw, painful, and defining. Their refusal to acknowledge my pain and their demand for support pushed me further away, solidifying my resolve to protect myself emotionally and financially. At that moment, I realized that true family wasn't defined by blood or convenience, but by respect and unconditional support. And I finally understood that the scars from my past would never fully heal without setting firm boundaries. After refusing to fund my half-sibling's education, the fragile distance between my mother and me shattered beyond repair. What started as a cold dismissal soon spiraled into relentless confrontations that tore deeper into old wounds I thought had scarred over. The battle was no longer about money alone, it was about reclaiming my dignity amid a family dynamic poisoned by resentment and betrayal. My mother, desperate and cornered by life's hardships, shifted tactics. Emails flooded my inbox. More than just requests, these were thinly veiled accusations. Each message carried undertones of guilt, trying to force me to feel indebted to a person who had abandoned me. But to me, those words were venom, a toxic reminder that the woman who raised me saw me not as a daughter but as a problem standing in the way of her new family's comfort. One email stood out, her recounting of sacrifices she claimed to have made raising me alone. Reading it, I felt a surge of anger mixed with sorrow. Of course she had to care for me, it was her duty, not a favor. But the way she wielded sacrifice as a weapon to guilt-trip me was unbearable. I realized then that no matter how much I tried to explain my perspective, she was unwilling to meet me halfway. Things escalated further when she showed up unannounced at my workplace. I wasn't there that day, but the receptionist's frantic call threw my heart into a panic. My mother refused to leave, demanding a meeting as if we had prolonged history to mend, when in fact our last contact had been years ago, cold and transactional at best. I made it clear through the phone that her presence was unwelcome, warning there would be legal consequences if she persisted. That tense conversation was my attempt to draw a line in the sand, to protect my hard-earned peace. Yet, peace was hard to come by. Shortly after, she appeared again, this time outside my home. The confrontation spiraled quickly from verbal to physical. Shockwaves of disbelief rippled through me as she lunged at me, words turning into curses, blame, and frantic accusations. The fight was brutal but brief, my body reacted to protect what little safety I had carved out for myself. The neighbors, sensing the turmoil, called the police, bringing an abrupt halt to the nightmare. In the aftermath, surrounded by flashing lights and heavy silence, I made the painful decision to press charges. It wasn't just a physical defense, it was a declaration that my boundaries were no longer negotiable. The woman who once nurtured me had become a threat, and I had to choose survival over longing for the maternal love that was never truly there. Harry, my stepfather, moved out around this time, distancing himself from the chaos, seemingly appalled by his wife's behavior. Even he, who had once been a silent enforcer of my exile, seemed to break away, underscoring how far my mother had fallen into bitterness and isolation. Through all this, the emotional turmoil was immense. I wrestled with guilt, sorrow, and lingering hope that maybe, somehow, my mother could heal and change. But every encounter peeled back another layer of denial and selfishness, cementing my resolve to protect myself fully. After the storm of betrayal, conflict, and heartbreak, I finally began to glimpse a future where I could reclaim my peace and redefine my life on my own terms. The ache of rejection, the scars of abandonment, these were not easy to carry, but they became the foundation of a fierce resolve within me. I realized that survival was no longer enough. I needed to thrive, to build something untouchable by the past. The decision to seek legal protection, filing for a restraining order, felt devastating but necessary. It was a moment of painful clarity. Love alone could not shield me from harm, and boundaries were no longer optional but vital. When the police stepped in, when Harry finally left the chaos, the family I had known fractured beyond repair. Even my grandparents, once hopeful for reconciliation, chose distance, protecting their own peace from the maelstrom my mother had created. Yet in this isolation, I found unexpected strength. I began to envision a new chapter, one where I am free from fear and manipulation. With my career flourishing and financial independence secured, I started planning a new home, a sanctuary of my own making. Every brick, every room, would be a symbol of resilience and self-respect. A tangible rebuke to the years spent feeling unwanted. But beyond material security, the deepest transformation was internal. I learned to forgive, but not to forget. Forgive not for their sake, but to release myself from the chains of bitterness and pain. I embraced the truth that family isn't just defined by blood, but by trust, love, and care. And though my biological mother was absent in those definitions, I built my own family, friends, mentors, and chosen loved ones who see and value me. This journey wasn't just about overcoming the cruelty of my past, it was about reclaiming my identity, my dignity, and my future. The battles I fought shaped me, but they don't define me. Instead, they fuel the fire to create a life that is authentically mine, full of hope and hard-won joy. As I share this story, I hope it resonates with anyone caught in the storm of familial pain or rejection. You are not alone. And no matter how dark the night feels, the dawn of a new beginning is always within reach. This story is far from a fairy tale. It's raw, painfully real, and still unfolding. But it's also a testament to the strength we can find inside ourselves when the world turns its back. If you've stayed with me on this journey, thank you. Your presence is a reminder that stories of struggle and survival create connection and empathy, a kind of healing we all need. Wherever you come from, whatever your story, please share your thoughts below. Let's build a community where nobody feels invisible or alone. Thank you for listening. I'm moving forward, not just surviving, but truly living. And I hope my story helps you believe you can, too.